Hello and welcome to the Reviews Brothers. Here we're going to be taking a look at some games with a Western theme, something that doesn't seem to get nearly as many games as you'd expect, which is strange considering that when it does, many of the games tend to be pretty damn good. I will admit here that I have cheated a little bit and have included a few reviews that have featured in some of my other videos. I hope you don't mind me repeating them. Now, how about I shut up, you press that subscribe button, and we take a look at some games. First up, here is Cowboy Kid for the SNES by Romstar. You'll never believe it, but you play as Cowboy Kid, and if you're lucky enough to have a friend, which sadly I am not, then you can even play this two-player co-op with your mate, and they take control of a cool little Indian dude. The story here is a simple one. You move to a new town and start stabbing people and stealing their money. The sheriff of the town sees how good you are at murdering, so immediately gives you a job in law enforcement. So basically, the game is way ahead of its time. As a sheriff, you have to take down some bandits. You'll find all of the outlaws currently on the loose, so you can choose which one you want to go after, Mega Man style. Then you set out to bring them to justice. What I did not expect from this game though is that it's kind of an open world affair, so you have to explore towns, mountains, caves and other exciting Wild West environments on your mission. There's also locations specific to each boss, like the classic trope of fighting on top of a train. And honestly, it's pretty damn cool. There's enemies everywhere. In fact, anyone that's just wandering the streets here deserves to die apparently. Thankfully, they will drop money and you'll need this to buy items from the shop. Extra hearts can increase your maximum health and things like that, as well as items like helping you explore, like the map or the ladders which will help you reach high areas or escape dungeons. What's also good is that the enemies always respawn when you enter a new area, so it's easy to farm money and buy everything from the shops in just a couple of minutes. No needless grinding here, so what you need to do is talk to the locals, as many of them will help you find whatever it is you're looking for. They give you clues and hints, sometimes of their own free will, but often you'll need to get them an item or something like that for them to spill the beans. The game makes you explore every inch of the town and it doesn't really get tedious. What helps is that the game moves at a fast pace, which is definitely a good thing, and none of the areas are too large, so getting lost is never really an issue, especially if you've got the map that I hinted at before. Most of the game you'll be using a knife to attack, which is where a small amount of frustration comes in. You do have a decent enough range on your attack and the hit detection is okay, but the perspective here isn't taken into account, so what I mean is that if an enemy is above you and it touches your hat, technically it shouldn't hurt you as they wouldn't be behind you, however you will still take damage at that angle and your knife won't reach them. You will get a gun a bit later on though, so it's not too much of an issue. This can also make some of the boss fights pretty tough, as they're running around all over the place, and you just have to sort of chase them, hammering the attack button if you don't have the gun, hoping that you have more health than they do. Having said that though, it doesn't hurt the game enough not to recommend it. It looks a little basic, but it has a pretty charming art style. The music is good, though only a short loop so you'll hear it a lot. But overall, this is a really fun game, and it's not one that many people talk about. It was way better than I was expecting, and probably as close to Red Dead Redemption as you can get on the SNES. Sticking with the SNES, here is Gunsmoke by Capcom. In Gunsmoke, you play as an unnamed gunslinger who wanders into a town only to find that it's been taken over by an evil gang called the Wingates. In fact, they're all over the place. Being the good unnamed gunslinger that you are, you agree to use your special set of skills, which involve being able to shoot left, right or straight ahead, to go and murder the lot of them. So Gunsmoke is basically a vertically scrolling shooter, which for some reason I never really noticed until kind of recently, despite owning the game for years. In fact, I think it's because it's not set in space. It gives the whole thing a completely different feel, and it's by far my favourite scrolling shooter. It's not a particularly long game, but each level is packed with enemies that want your pixelated blood, and are actually quite good at getting it as well. As I mentioned, you can shoot in 3 directions. B shoots right, A shoots to the left, and if you press both buttons together, you shoot straight ahead. The enemies have various patterns and weapons, which you'll need to get used to, and they come at you from just about anywhere and everywhere on the screen, so you'll need some good reactions. Thankfully, the townsfolk offer to help you by selling you new weapons and items. I mean, it would have been more useful if they just gave them to you, considering you've offered to murder hundreds of people for free, but anyway. There's a few weapons that you can buy, like a shotgun which has a short range but acts like a spread shot, a machine gun which is weak but fires fast, and a magnum which is really powerful but doesn't carry much ammo, so it is perfect for bosses. And finally you can get a smart bomb which you can use once per level. It kills everything on screen except the bosses, and what's cool is that you can switch between any of your weapons that you've bought from the pause menu. Enemies will sometimes drop ammo when you kill them, but do be careful because if you die, you lose the weapon that you're carrying. So if you know you're about to bite the dust, be sure to quickly switch back to your regular pistols. The boss of each level will only appear once you've bought or found a wanted poster for that level. You can buy it from the shop, or you can find it somewhere hidden on the level. The only way to find it though is to shoot everywhere, and at times it will sound like you're hitting something when there's nothing there. Keep shooting this one spot and it'll appear. If you don't have the wanted poster, the levels just keep looping and looping until you do. As you're making your way through the levels, make sure you shoot all the barrels that you see as well. They contain things that will help you, like ammo, extra lives, invincibility, or even a horse that you can ride. I never knew that that's where cowboys kept their horses. The horse lets you take 3 extra hits, which is very useful, especially on the later levels. You can only usually take 1 hit, though I do feel guilty when the horse dies. You can also find gun icons in the barrels, which increase the range of your regular shot, and boots which make you move faster. You can only carry 5 of each of these, and you lose one every time you die. But if you do see a skull, avoid it, as these power you down. The only real issues I have with Gunsmoke are that sometimes the clipping is a little wonky, and you can get stuck on the scenery every now and then. Usually you end up just going straight through it though, so it's fine. But sometimes you will die, and sometimes it causes you to get shot. It doesn't happen very often, but when it did, it's very noticeable. Also, it's only a 1-player game. Now, having a second player would have been manic with the amount of enemies on screen, but it would have been great fun to have played this with a friend. In fact, I'd just like to have a friend. But I digress. In a nutshell though, I'd say this is an essential game if you own a NES. Time for some 16-bit sexiness now with Sunset Riders for the Super Nintendo from Konami. This is a port from the arcade and basically is a Contra game with a cowboy lick of paint, and it works really well. The game is bright and colourful, and you've guessed it, you have to set out to take down some wanted criminals. There's 4 characters you can choose from, each of which control the same but they have slightly different weapons, from regular pistols to shotguns with a wide range. You'll soon find your favourite, but I like to mix it up and change my character every now and then. You'll play through all sorts of Wild West themed levels, and throughout the game you'll find power-ups that make your guns stronger, though you never actually get a different weapon, which is a bit of a shame. The levels are all packed with enemies all over the place, and it doesn't take long for the screen to fill up with bullets for you to dodge. They don't move too fast, and you've got a few moves like a slide and the ability to jump up and to high areas by holding up and pressing jump, which will help you avoid the bullets and stop you from dying. I recommend getting used to the dodge move very quickly, as you probably won't get far without it. The game is pretty damn tough. Some levels have you riding your horse, and there's stuff constantly being thrown at you from off the screen. You can only take 1 hit and you're dead. Dead. So you need lightning reactions to play this game. And as it's a Konami one, the music and sound are awesome, with some really good tunes and some funny voice samples from the bosses giving you a one-liner before they attack. It's great and gives the game a decent personality. If you're one of those people that has a friend, you can play this together in co-op, and it's a lot of fun. In fact, the first time I played this game was at my friend Raymond's house, and it's before I had Super Nintendo, so I absolutely sucked balls at it. Thankfully, he's a patient guy, and we just kept trying until we managed to beat a few levels. Wonder what he's up to these days. On paper, Sunset Riders is actually a very simple game. You just make your way from left to right, shooting everything that moves and avoiding bullets. But it's done so well with excellent controls, great graphics and decent sound, and it's overall a fantastic package. And if you like a challenging shooter, this is one you should definitely try out. Sunset Riders also got a release on the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis. It plays similarly to the Super Nintendo version, but is also kind of different. The graphics are a little darker, but I do like how they look. Most of the characters and animations look basically the same, except here you can only choose from 2 of the characters, one with a pistol and one with a shotgun, but that's fair enough. I do much prefer the explosions in this version though, as they're much better looking than the SNES's pixely ones. The main differences though, other than choosing 2 characters, are the controls, as you only have 3 buttons to work with. You no longer have a dedicated dodge button. Instead you have to press diagonally down and jump, which works well. The levels are now slightly different, with new areas and sections in them, and as far as I can see there's even a couple of levels that have been removed or slightly reworked into some of the other levels, and the boss fights are also slightly different here. You get a few bonus levels where you get a few extra lives and points. These are fun, and they replace the horse riding levels from the SNES version, with you riding your horse to collect the item, but I didn't really like that level in the SNES anyway. And of course, who could forget the fact that you now get sexy wenches when you go into the saloons here. That naughtiness was taken out of the SNES version though, thank goodness. Overall, this is still an excellent game. I do prefer the SNES one just about, mainly thanks to the controls, but this one stands well enough on its own even with the differences that I would say is actually worth owning both of them. Dashin Desperados for the Sega Mega Drive, or Genesis if that's how you choose to live your life, is a strange little game about some horny cowboys both looking to bang the same woman, but as she isn't into threesomes, she makes clunge-hungry cowboys race across a variety of levels to get her something. The winner then presumably gets to ride the rodeo. The game is always in split screen so you can see yourself and your opponent, and throughout the levels there are items and traps that you can collect that will either help you out or you can use them to cock block the other guy. It's surprisingly fun, with some daft humour, tight controls and some actually decent graphics. The main issue with the game though is that it does get repetitive quite quickly, and often getting around the levels can be confusing, which sometimes adds to the chaos, but usually ends up with you both just stuck in the same place. But if you do want a multiplayer game with a difference though, this is definitely worth an hour or so of your time. Lethal Enforcers 2 for the Mega Drive is the sequel to Lethal Enforcers 1, but this time, rather than being a copied 90s America, you are a cowboy in the Wild West. It's a light gun game, but thankfully you can play with a controller, like me, though I imagine it would be infinite better with a light gun. You play as a sheriff and you go from level to level doing some rootin' tootin' shootin' to stop bandits, Indians and other lowlifes from being, well, lowlives I suppose. All you need to do is point your cursor at the enemy and press the shoot button. Then press the button to reload it. Single enemies pop up from all over the place, but you usually have a decent amount of time to get your cursor over them before they shoot you. But there are times when 2 or 3 enemies come on screen at once, and it's physically impossible to shoot them all in time. I guess this doesn't happen if you have the light gun. Luckily, you do get a fair amount of lives and continues also. The levels are surprisingly destructible, and you'll find health as you play, along with a surprising amount of weapons like shotguns, Gatling guns and even a cannon. These will increase the rate of your fire or the size of your crosshair or your power. Most of these weapons you will keep until you take a hit as well, which is quite nice. Now, I think this is a game that a lot of people would find quite ugly, but I really love the dodgy digitised sprites of people in bad cosplay. It really suits the game, though it can make it hard to distinguish between enemies and drunk passers-by that you're not meant to shoot. And I do mean that literally. There are drunk citizens everywhere that stumble onto the screen in the middle of a gunfight. It's actually quite funny, and once you've shot him a few times, you start to recognise the bastard so you can avoid him. The game's got a few voice samples. Actually, it doesn't have many voice samples, there's about 5, but it plays them over and over. But actually, I found it didn't get annoying. It just made me feel like I was in an arcade in the early 90s, and the sound quality is actually quite good for the Mega Drive. This is another game that you can play in co-op with a buddy, and honestly, I had a blast playing through this and it kept me coming back till I finished it. I have a feeling that some people will get bored as the levels can drag on a bit, and you do have to start from the beginning every time, and there's no save or password. But still, check this one out if you like rail shooters. Gunpull, Gunman's Proof, It's a Strange World for the SNES is a really cool game, which is basically what you'd get if you took a Link to the Past and replaced Link with a cowboy. There is a wacky story here where you are a kid cowboy and you're out exploring one day when a UFO appears. You meet the aliens who turn out to be friendly, but they warn you about some evil aliens that have taken over. By the time you get home, the evil aliens are everywhere. Well, one thing leads to another and you end up on a quest to kill all the alien bosses and get rid of the whole lot. And yep, it works a lot like Zelda. You have a large overworld map which you need to explore to find the dungeons where the evil bosses live. The overworld is split into sections and it's full of enemies that you'll need to defeat, as well as obstacles and puzzles that you'll need to navigate to get to new areas. Often you'll come back to a place later on in the game with a new item to move an obstacle or something like that. You know, like Zelda. Sorry, there's a lot of comparisons here. Enemies are all aliens and they come in a few flavours. Some look like cowboys, some are just generic alien looking things, and some are bug looking things. Then you have the huge bosses to fight, which are always really cool. Being a cowboy, you've got a gun to defend yourself with, and thankfully it has unlimited ammo. And as you progress, you'll get new bullets and ammo types for it. Some of these are limited though. You also have a charge shot that you can do, which is really powerful. As well as this, you can punch, which isn't too great against enemies as you stop moving when you punch, or never even really needed. But you will also need to use it at certain times to move blocks or destroy certain objects. and there's bombs you can find as well. These just work as clear-all attacks for when you're in trouble. The dungeons here are really fun, and you get a map that builds up as you explore them. You just need to find the boss here, and there aren't a huge amount of puzzles, which is kind of strange, and I didn't even have to worry about keys, which I didn't really expect. You meet lots of characters along the way, and the game has a great sense of humour, which is good. It was actually only released in Japan, but there are English translations out there, and from what I've played, it's done very well. Graphically, it looks excellent. Again, it's very Zelda-like. In fact, I would probably believe you if you told me that this was just a fan-made hack or a mod, but it's not. It seems like quite a short game, and it's quite easy as well. I've only played it for a couple of hours, and I've already killed about half the bosses, but that's fine with me, as it's constantly fun to play. This is another game that a lot of people probably don't know about, and I only do thanks to watching GameSack, but it's definitely one that deserves a lot of love. Give it a go if you can. Wanted for the original PlayStation is a budget game, so you shouldn't expect too much. There isn't really a story here other than you're a lone gunman taking out all sorts of bandits, and the gameplay is just as simple. It's a third person view and you can move left or right as well as being able to dive left or right. You move a crosshair around the level and shoot the enemies, and that's it. As you kill the enemies, a bar depletes at the bottom of the screen. Kill enough enemies and you move on, and that's all there is to it. The levels only move a little bit and it's just a fixed screen. They'll drop points and extra weapons for you to use, like a machine gun or shotgun. These are kind of fun. It's a bit odd because there's no music, only sound effects, which feels a bit empty. Also, the game is basically just a high score-a-thon. The game actually looks pretty good, but considering it's just one character model and some buildings, you'd expect it to. It's not like it's pushing the hardware. All the enemies are 2D sprites, so there can be loads of them popping up at once. Overall, it's a budget game, and it's kind of fun for a few minutes, but it won't be long before you're bored. Now, if you've always wanted to play Red Dead Redemption and Sekiro, but only have enough money for one of them and can't decide which one you want, then you might want to just buy Rising Zan Samurai Cowboy instead. This is an awesome action game where you play as the samurai cowboy in a world that is part Wild West, part feudal Japan, and all totally awesome. The story is basically what you probably expect. You go back to your town to find that some evil bandits have taken it over, so you set out to kick their heads in and restore justice as any good samurai cowboy would do. But of course here the outlaws are all ninjas, sumos and other questionable Japanese stereotypes. You'll be exploring some really cool levels that have a great mix of Japanese and Western influences, from Wild West towns to saloons that are decorated in Japanese style to trains that are also decorated the same way. These are all packed with character and cool details, and as well as enemies of course, and the combat here is really fun, if a little stiff. You've got two weapons, your 6-shooter and your samurai sword, and you're pretty damn good with both. Your gun has unlimited ammo and of course attacks from a distance. You can lock onto enemies to shoot them, but they can and often will block your attacks, so it isn't as easy as you'd think. Also, when you're shooting you can't move, so you're open to most attacks. Your main weapon though will be your sword, and you've got a standard combo that you do by hammering the attack button, but by double tapping a direction and then pressing the attack button, you'll do a special slash, which does loads of damage but uses some of your blue energy. But don't worry, as this recharges over time. You can also press triangle to go into a frenzy mode where your speed and power are dramatically increased, and you also get an awesome funky song to go along with it. The enemies come in a load of varieties and they're all fun to fight. Each one has their own strategies to defeat, and you'll need to learn to dodge and block with the shoulder buttons, but I never once got tired of the combat, and especially loved fighting the dozens of bosses throughout the game. There's just so much personality here. The game does not take itself seriously at all, and the script is full of actually funny jokes. There's loads of quick time events here as well, but these are actually well done, and always get you a cool cutscene to go along with them. The graphics, as you can see, are fantastic. I really love the art style and the variety in just about everything here. The cutscenes are all well done and very hammy, and there's plenty of blood and gore in here as well, which makes the combat even more satisfying. You've got to shout out the music and sound here as well, which are all fantastic, with great voice acting and an awesome disco cowboy vibe. This was the first time I'd played this game, and I had an absolute blast. It's easily one of the best games I've discovered while making this series, and I would absolutely say that this is a must-have for any PS1 owner. here is Gunslinger, the legend of Jesse James, a light gun shooter set in the Old West. Now, I'm going to guess that you can guess the story without me even telling it to you. That's right, you are Jesse James, and you're a cowboy, and you've got to kill them varmin outlaws that have done kidnapped your girl. And it's all done in a first-person light gun fashion. The game mechanics taken straight out of the Time Crisis series. Here you go through your usual western-themed levels like saloons, gold mines, cactus-filled levels, towns and bandit camps. You've got your trusty 6-shooter and unlimited ammo, and you have to kill everyone you see. Well, almost everyone. Enemies come in range of varieties. You get your common goons to people with shotguns, molotovs, axes, bows and arrows, and so on. As in the Time Crisis games, you can take cover to avoid enemy shots, and then you pop out to take out the enemies. Hiding also reloads your gun, and there's a few pictures of cards in the bottom left of the screen which act as your health. Enemies will be constantly shooting at you, and while there's no indicator to say when you're about to be hit, you can see the enemy bullets, so it's often easy to know roughly when you're about to be shot. Also, enemies come in a few different colours, with some being more accurate than others, and you'll soon learn which ones to avoid or to kill first. What's a little annoying here though is that enemies don't wait to shoot at you when you pop out from cover. They'll just be consistently shooting, meaning there are times when you pop out from behind cover and don't realise that you've just been shot at, so you pop out and the bullet immediately hits your face, and there's not a goddamn thing you can do about it. This can be kind of frustrating. Of course, it didn't help that I was playing the game with the controller rather than an actual light gun, so my reactions weren't as good as they should have been. Something that's kinda handy though is that if you are playing with the controller, you can position your cursor anywhere on the screen while you're in cover and it stays there when you pop out, meaning you can pop out for just a second, get a rough idea of where the enemies are, go back in cover, place the cursor roughly where the enemy is, and then when you come out again, you're pretty much already lined up. Once I realised how to use this properly, the game was much more manageable. The levels here are also timed, so you can't hang around for too long, though generally I didn't ever come close to running out on the timer. Also, there are time pickups on the levels that you can shoot for some precious extra seconds, and you'll also find a generous amount of health packs, and overall, the game is actually quite fair. The graphics here are good, the character models are decent and animate well, the cutscenes are great and have suitably crap voicing acting which is just terrible, but it makes the game unintentionally funny and I very much approve. The soundtrack is great and what you'd expect from a western, with the usual whistles and dramatic yee-haws. It was very enjoyable. I'd never heard of this game before and I didn't realise it was going to be a light gun game, but I ended up really having a lot of fun with it and would definitely recommend adding it to your collection, especially if you're a fan of the light gun and you have one handy. Here is Silverload, a point-and-click adventure game that is set in the Wild West and is a spooky tale of a town of Silverload that's being harassed by some evil creatures, including werewolves, vampires, demons and more. You take control of a character known only as the Gunslinger, and you meet some lovely people who are not in the best shape, and they warn you about Silverload. But as you're a gunslinger, you throw caution to the wind in an attempt to see how you can make a quick buck off the plight of the people there. As it's a point-and-click adventure, you spend pretty much the whole game just moving a cursor around the screen. You've got the option to look at stuff, interact with stuff, or pick up stuff, and that's about it. But that's all you need in a game like this. You'll need to scour every inch of the screen in order to collect various items that you'll need to defend yourself, as well as gain access to new areas and puzzles. And the puzzles here are pretty tough and cryptic. Everything you collect is stored in your inventory, which appears when you move the cursor to the bottom of the screen. Here you can equip items by putting them in your hands or on your face if it's glasses, for a funky new hat. And you'll even need to defend yourself at times. The game has a ton of really cool cutscenes and locations, and you'll want to talk to everyone to get as many hints for where you need to go and what you need to do. The game does very little in the way of hand-holding, which can cause some frustration, as there were times when I was wandering around in circles for ages trying to figure out what the hell I needed to do and what combination of items I needed to get. Also, when using items and looking for exits, it's never actually that easy. There's no indicators on the screen as to where you need to press in order to move on to the next screen or pick up items, so I had to resort to just moving the cursor everywhere and hammering the X button. But once you do get used to it, it's really not bad. And in fact, I really got engrossed in the story and characters here, and there's a lot of that, and the cutscenes are especially excellent and have some really good spooky stuff going on in them. In fact, there is quite a lot of gore in here, and this is a great game for anyone that's into horror.
The story takes you through all sorts of strange places, and you'll deal with damsels in distress, monsters, Native Americans, and all sorts of other strange folk, and I always look forward to seeing who I was going to meet next. Also, there are monsters lurking all over the place, and if you spend too much time in certain areas without the proper way to defend yourself, you'll get a cool cutscene where you're killed and will have to go back to your last save, so save often. Now, as it's a point-and-click game, that's really all there is to say about it. But I had a really good time with this one. It did take me a while to get into it, but once it got its fangs into me, I found it hard to put down. As I said before, this is definitely one that horror fans should check out, but do be prepared to sink a good few hours into it in your first playthrough.
Here's a great game that doesn't get the love it deserves. It's Darkwatch from Capcom. Darkwatch is a first-person shooter where you play as Jericho. Original name, I know. You're an outlaw who goes to rob a train. As you've heard, there's a crazy treasure in the vault on board. Turns out though that the treasure that was in the vault that you opened is actually a crazy powerful vampire demon called Lazarus. Another original name, I know. And you've just set the bastard free, and wouldn't you know it, he's raised an army of the dead. Git. And to make it worse, he's killed you and made you into a vampire as well. Double git. Lucky for you, this actually kind of helps you out, as you now have vampire powers. So, on top of your already impressive human outlaw powers of being able to shoot stuff real good, you can do crazy vampire shit. Another stroke of luck is that you happen to have not been the only person on that train, and there was a sexy woman also on board who happens to work for the Darkwatch, a super secret group of gunslingers who protect the world from evil. As Jericho isn't actually evil, he reluctantly joins the Darkwatch and goes on a mission to right his wrong and take down Lazarus. What really sets this apart from other FPS games of the time is the awesome western undead settings. Yeah, we've got Red Dead Redemption these days, but at the time there was really nothing like it. The game is largely level based and quite linear, so you'll go from level to level where your objective is basically to get from A to B, but actually doing so is actually loads of fun and can also be frustrating at times. Being a western, you get a load of weapons, as you might expect. You get a 6-shooter, a rifle, shotgun, etc. These all work well enough and actually feel quite powerful. You even have dynamite that you can have as a secondary weapon. But the best thing about the weapons are the melee attacks you can do with them. All of the Darkwatch weapons have spikes or blades on them and are often more powerful used as melee attacks rather than shooting ones. Of course, you can still blow enemies to bits, but getting up close and using the shotgun melee attack to dismember a zombie never gets old, especially with the great ragdoll physics that they have here. The levels are also kind of what you'd expect. You explore towns, caves, mines, saloons and desert areas, and you've got a few levels on horseback, which are a nice diversion. The levels are all pretty long and often a case of getting to an area which is then blocked off with a magical barrier, then you have to kill all the monsters in the area to proceed. Often some evil trees will even appear, and these have to be destroyed first as enemies won't stop appearing until they're gone. And the monsters really come in some cool varieties. Most of them are just zombie things that run at you, but you've got undead gunslingers, snipers, big fat blob men, and of course the big boobed saloon looking banshee prostitute ladies. I hate these women as they are absolute bullet sponges and a real pain in the ass to kill. You do also get vampire powers, most notably a shield that recharges, so if you're running low on health, just hide for a bit. You also get a double jump, a silver bullet which kills most enemies in one hit, and a death stare that scares enemies and stops them from attacking you. These are all acquired as you play, and you find souls that you have the option to consume or free as you play. Basically, you're choosing to be good or bad, and depending on what you choose actually determines the powers you get, which is cool. And to be fair, I've only ever been a good guy, because obviously I'm a good guy. And I don't actually know what the bad guy powers are. I might have to play through this again. The graphics here are fantastic and the designs on everything are really great. Some of the levels are a bit samey and can be confusing to know where you've been and where you need to go, but it's never too hard. The controls aren't necessarily the best though. They work fine, but aiming does feel a bit stiff and imprecise a lot of the time, and sometimes jumping can be a pain. Something I didn't expect though is that you can play this game in 2-player co-op, and I actually have owned this game since it was released, and I remember me and my friend Julian playing through it in split screen and having an absolute blast. And I actually just picked it up for the original Xbox recently, and I look forward to trying it out there too. Anyway, this game really is great. It does a good job of standing out amongst the other FPS games, and it's a game that I would really love to see get a remake, remaster, or even a sequel on modern consoles. It would look fantastic, and I really think it could have been a great franchise. Here is Call of Juarez for the Xbox 360, also available on all the other systems of the time that aren't Nintendo. This Wild West story follows two characters, Billy and Ray. Hey Billy Ray. Billy comes back from a few years of unsuccessfully hunting for gold, but doesn't want to see his dad, who is a bit of a dickhead. And one thing leads to another, and Billy ends up on the run. Ray, who is Billy's dad's brother, is now a local preacher, but turns out to be an ex-badass gunslinger and sets out to find Billy, who ran away. As the game progresses, all sorts of things happen, and they end up working together to find the lost treasure of Juarez, a fortune of gold that people have been looking for years. Of course, there's lots of other people looking for this as well, and you'll need to shoot them in the face. The game is a first-person shooter and is basically full-on action. There are a good amount of levels that take you through Wild West towns, Indian outposts, caves, mountains, mines, rivers, the usual Wild West stuff, but it's all done very well. The levels are quite linear, with just one path to follow most of the time, and objectives are rarely anything more than kill everyone and get to the end, but that's alright. The game has plenty of cutscenes to put everything together and make you not notice that you're just shooting everyone. Thankfully, the shooting is done well. You get your usual array of Wild West guns, a few pistols, shotguns, rifles, crossbows and dynamite, and this game isn't one that worries about forcing you to aim down the sights, meaning you can hold the weapon in each hand, provided it's not a two-handed weapon, that is. The action is fast-paced, and being a cowboy, you have showdowns with other people at times, and you'll want to be fastest on the draw. And you also have a slow-mo mode, which is pretty cool, that when it's built up, you can take out loads of enemies very quickly. These bits can be tricky, but they're fun for the most part. The game definitely does have its problems though. Moving and aiming can feel a bit clunky. This is one of those games where you see your whole body if you look down, and they often have trouble with accurate jumping or getting stuck on scenery, which I did notice here on some of the jumping platformy sections. It was never really so bad that you die, but definitely enough that it put you in a sticky situation at times. The graphics are very good for their time. Can you believe this game is nearly 20 years old, being released in 2006, but the levels and characters are all detailed enough and it runs surprisingly smoothly as well. When you beat the story mode, you also get a bunch of bonus missions, which is cool. These are smaller levels that give you different objectives like rescuing people, and they're noticeably trickier as well. I had fun playing through this, and I do also have the second game in the series, which, if I remember rightly, was actually even better than this one. I haven't played the others in the series though. It is super cheap these days, so I definitely recommend giving it a go. Gun, shown here on the Xbox 360, is one of the best cowboy games out there. You play as Colt, who is out for revenge after his dad is murdered. So you grab your horse and set out across an open Wild West world, completing missions, mining gold, hunting wild animals, and playing poker in brothels, just like any good cowboy should. It's an early Xbox 360 game, so it does look a little rough around the edges, but it still plays really well with solid controls and some really fun shooting. You have a quick draw mode which slows things down and puts you in a first person view, letting you pull off some nice headshots with a variety of old timey weapons, including a bow and arrow, which you'll need to use when hunting animals. It's not a very long game, even with all the side quests, but it's an interesting story and it's surprisingly gory and it keeps you interested. The open world is pretty small by today's standards and there isn't a whole lot going on in it, but it's still fun. I love this game on the GameCube, but the Xbox 360 version is definitely the more superior version. However, this is a game that should be played on whatever system you can get it for. And finally for today, here is Red Dead Redemption, again shown on the Xbox 360, but it's available anywhere that's powerful enough to run it. Red Dead Redemption might be the definitive cowboy experience in a video game form, at least it was until the sequel came out. Often billed as a Grand Theft Auto with horses, which I kind of agree with, but not really. This game sees you play through a huge story about a chap called John Marsden, who is on a mission to help the lawmakers take down his former gang that he left after meeting his wife and having a kid. What a noble guy. He does this reluctantly though, and it's either that or be shot to bits. Of course, the plot becomes a whole lot more convoluted than this, and you meet dozens of characters along the way, getting yourself involved with all sorts of other stories as well. Now, I'm sure I probably don't need to say a lot about this game, so I'll keep it fairly brief. After an overly drawn out couple of hours at the start of the game, you're then left to explore a huge open world filled with towns, bandits, critters and missions that you can take on. You can follow the story mode, but will likely find yourself spending more time just riding around between missions just to see what you can find. In fact, some of the best things that happen here are probably the ones that are nothing to do with the main story. Completing all the side missions will get you money, and there's plenty of weapons, horses and outfits that you can spend your hard-earned cash on. You can also hunt and kill animals and skin them, letting you use their skins for money, or sometimes using it to fashion yourself some nice new clothes. Being a cowboy, you also get a lasso. This is really fun to use, and there's times where you'll come across some no-good varmin that are on the run from the law. If you want to, you can lasso them up and deliver them to jail for even more money. You also have a reputation, which is up to you what you do with it. If you want to be a good guy, then you can help people in need and generally not be a dick. But if you fancy it, you can just shoot everyone you see in the face and cause havoc. This will put a bounty on your head, so you're likely to be attacked by just about everyone you meet, as well as constantly being on the lookout for the law who are hunting you down. And it does actually affect how people react to you, which is cool. Obviously, I'm a good guy, so everybody loves me, and the bad guys are all scared of me. Graphically, the game looks gorgeous, and I'd say is one of the best on the Xbox 360 in terms of open worlds. It can at times look a little sparse, but you never get tired of exploring, and the game is just huge. It's one of those games where when you think you're just about to come to the end, something happens and then another 10 hours gets put on top. I don't know how many hours I've put into it, but I've completed the main story and pretty much all of the side missions as far as I can tell. The trouble with that though is that it means the footage here is a bit boring. Sorry. You don't have to take my word for it though, as I'm sure you already know, but this game is bloody brilliant. I have the second one, but I haven't actually started playing it yet, as I know it's going to take up a whole lot of my time that I just don't have at the moment, but I definitely will get around to it at some point. So yeah, get this game, preferably the Game of the Year edition, which also has the Undead Nightmare version, which turns the Wild West into a zombie apocalypse, and is just as fun to play. So there you go, some rootin' tootin' western games. Have you played any of these? What games should I include if I get round to doing a part 2? As always, let me know in the comments below. Now, all that's left for me to say is thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.